Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the Trailblazer Community Group, Bella Vista, Western Sydney's Developer Group. Good evening if you're joining from Australia or New Zealand, and good morning and good afternoon from other region. Thank you for joining this session. And today we have that amazing speaker with us, Ashish Agarwal, with sharing about the step-by-step guiding to getting started with the Salesforce API using the Postman. So last month we had that successful inauguration community session. Now it's a second session in the community. So about that, Ashish Agarwal, he is an architect and trainer and blogger for the asagarwal.com. So I inspired about his blog. He's sharing a lot of new content, and especially the step-by-step guide every week. And also, I noticed this Winter 21 release features. He regularly, every day, one tip he is sharing through emails. If you're not subscribed already, just to go ahead with his blog called asagarwal.com and subscribe and get familiarized about that Winter 21 release. Also, the step-by-step guide. He is keep on sharing every week. And also he is a 25x Salesforce certified and 850 plus TrialGate batches. Now he is with us and providing the step-by-step guide to getting started with the Salesforce API using the Postman. Before kicking the session, a little bit about myself. I am Shaktivel Madesh. I am a Salesforce MEP and Lightning Champion and 17 times Salesforce certified and 7x TrialGate Ranger, and also community group leader for the Bella Vista Developer Group. And I'm working as a senior Salesforce developer at Tech4 Services Sydney. And you can follow me the social channels in LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm active those channels, and if you need any related the Salesforce information, keep touch base with me. I'm happy to help. And even I'm blogger and YouTuber. Just follow the blog and YouTube channel. Today, Ajanta will try to introduction and the group overview, and after that, Ashish Agarwal covering about the Salesforce API with the Postman, and also the end of the session, we are distributing that the Salesforce facts for the random participants. So only thing you need to wait till the end of the session to get this Salesforce facts, and finally summary and resources which we showed about this today's discussion. The group overview, the Trailblazer community group. Yes, don't forget to join the group to participate on our activities and be informed by email. So just simply join the group in the group community page. And also we have the chatter group and Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube channel also. So just to keep follow those channels. So to get the the community activities, and also not only this group, our group, and get involved with the other Trailblazer community groups also. In Western Sydney, we have the admin group, and this is the developer group. And other than that, we have already the Sydney developer group and other group like user group, Women in Tech, and TrialGate Tuesday. Just involve those Trailblazer community group and explore your knowledge, either as a speaker or participant, right? And the celebration point of view, yes, we can celebrate in virtually. This is not a in-person event. If it is an in-person event, we can celebrate in person. This is a virtual. So if you completed any TrialGate Ranger position, or if you recently completed any certification or completed any super projects, just share in the chat window. We will celebrate your success in virtual. Done. About that, the Trailblazer community groups news and updates and announcement. Yes, like yesterday we had that the Dreamforce, the TrialGate note, the Dreamforce notes, like they have like lot of big announcement in the Dreamforce. That is a one thing for the Slack, the agreement sign off. It's like 27.7 million. This is a huge acquisition. It's a big deal in terms of the cost. in ever with the Salesforce acquisition. Other than that, they shared the one thing like about Einstein Automate. It's like a end-to-end intelligent workflow automation. It's a big game changer once they introduced. So we are waiting more about that Einstein Automate. And also they discussed about the Hyperforce, that is opening doors to the public sector. It's a Salesforce platform using the public cloud to adopt the public sector. Other than that, they mentioned like a service cloud workforce. So I'm waiting for more information, and also many more. They announced during yesterday Dreamforce keynote. So you can watch the video is available already if you missed it. And also TrialGet Go, that app, the learning app available in Android mobile also. So you can learn from your mobile application in the TrialGet Go. And then the naming brand, recently the Salesforce changed the name from the Salesforce CPQ is now they name it, they call it as a Salesforce Revenue Cloud. So other than that, we rest of the things we discussed in the previous session. Upcoming meetings, about the upcoming meetings, if you are interested to present any topics in the community, any technical topics, please reach out to me. I'm trying to organize. And also the upcoming Trailblazer community groups events. So I noticed like in the Trailblazer community groups, they created it as the calendar view, just to navigate in this URL and check with the upcoming Trailblazer community groups events. And finally, like share your love to the social channels about the community group or leaders or about the speakers to the social channels like Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook in this tags, so that everyone aware, and even in future events they also joined and explore in the Salesforce knowledge through the Trailblazer community groups. So that's about me. It's over to Ashish. You share your screen and then introduce a little bit about yourself, and then you can start.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Saktivel. And just to confirm, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
So let me share my screen, and I will need another confirmation to make sure that you can see my screen also. Okay, I have shared my screen, and what you should be seeing on your desktop is the session agenda.
I can see that, yes, just an agenda PPT.
Right, okay. So let's get started. And good evening, Bella Vista, Ohana, and good morning and good afternoon to people joining from the other parts of the world. Let me start by thanking Saktivel for having me in this session and giving me the opportunity to meet you all. And I do want to thank you all for taking time out to attend this session on a Friday and learn something new and interesting. So as Saktivel mentioned, this session is going to be a beginner's guide to getting started with Salesforce APIs using Postman. Now, just the term API may sound a bit scary or too technical to some, but it really isn't. And we are going to make friends with API in this session. So what we are going to be covering in this session is we'll start by creating a connected app. Then I'll introduce Postman to you. Once from the first step that we will need to take is to connect Salesforce from Postman, after which we are going to create, delete, query, create, update, and delete records from Postman in Salesforce. We'll take a look at some of the useful Postman features, and we'll also see some of the resources you can go to explore more API calls. Now, please do note that I have a lot of ground to cover in this limited time. So I'll open the floor for Q&A towards the end. If you can hold on to your questions till then, that will really be appreciated. Or you can also leave it in the chat window, and we'll get to these chats towards the end. Moving on. So before we dive into connected apps, let's do a quick recap of what is an API. API is the acronym for Application Programming Interface. This basically defines the way how two systems or applications talk to each other. So in Salesforce context, if any external system needs to talk to Salesforce, it needs to make an API call. Now, using APIs, you can query, create, update, or delete records in Salesforce. Salesforce, ever since its evolution, has always taken an API-first approach. What this means is that Salesforce will come up with a robust API framework for a feature because before focusing it on designing its UI, which also means that for almost everything that you can do in Salesforce, there is a standard out-of-the-box API that you can use. And if the standard APIs do not serve your purpose, then you can create custom APIs using Apex. And then here is a link to a short video on YouTube that explains what is an API in simple terms with the analogy of a restaurant. So to connect to Salesforce through an external application, the first thing we need to do is to create a connected app. What is a connected app? It is a framework that enables an external application to integrate with Salesforce using APIs and some standard protocols like SAML, OAuth, or OpenID Connect. There are four main use cases for connected apps. You can access data with API integration. This is what we are going to be doing in this session. You can also integrate service providers with your Salesforce org to provide a single sign-on functionality. Now, this is applicable if you are using Salesforce as an identity provider. Then you can use connected app to manage access to a third-party app. For example, if you want to control who can access Salesforce mobile app or Workbench or data loader, you can use the connected app. And finally, it can provide authorization for external API gateways. Now, if some of these terms sound too technical and you don't fully understand what they mean, that is absolutely fine. For now, all we will need to do is to create a connected app so that we can connect to the Salesforce org from an external application. So let's go ahead and create a connected app in Salesforce. Now let me switch to the Postman. So again, Saktival, can you confirm if you can see the Postman screen? Sorry,
Yes.
the browser?
Yes. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Okay. So I am in my Salesforce org. What I'm going to do here is go to the setup. I will go to App Manager. And I'm going to create a connected app. So go to App Manager. We'll click on New Connected App. We'll need to give this app a name. So I will just call it Postman Live Demo. The API name gets populated automatically, and I need to specify my email address, and these are the mandatory fields. Then I'm going to enable this connected app for the OAuth settings. Now I need to specify a callback URL. So in this case, for today's session, this callback URL will not really be used. So I'm just going to specify a dummy callback URL. And I need to select the OAuth scope. Now, what you can do with this OAuth scope is you can further restrict what this connected app allows the third parties to do. So this is just adding another layer of security on the top of profiles, permission sets, and record visibility rules that is already there in Salesforce. So I'm going to select this and move it to the selected OAuth scope. I'm going to uncheck this. And then finally, I'm going to save this connected app. Now do note that the changes may take from 2 to 10 minutes for it to take effect. So click on continue. Now, once the connected app is created, what you will need to do is take note of the consumer key. So you can copy this value and paste it in a text file, as we will be requiring this later. You will also need to take note of the consumer secret. So you can click on this link here, copy this, and then paste it in your text file, as we will be needing it later. The next thing that we will need to do is click on Manage. We'll click on Edit Policies. And we need to define who all can access this connected app. So under permitted users, I am going to change this to admin approved users are pre-authorized. Click OK. Now the purpose of making this change is to explicitly control who will be able to access this connected app. So I'm going to go down and save this. And once we have changed the setting for the permitted user, we need to specify the profiles of the user who can access this connected app. So I'm going to click on Manage Profiles. And I'm going to select the profile of System Administrator. Click on Save. Now, even though we have created a connected app and granted access to System Administrator, do note that your profile must allow the user to access through the APIs. So for that, this is the profile of System Administrator, and you will need to make sure that this checkbox is checked, which is API enabled. Now for a System Administrator profile, this is checked by default, but if you are using any other profile, then you need to make sure that this is checked. So this completes the step for creating the connected app. Now let's go back to the presentation. And let's take a look at what is Postman. Postman basically is a GUI tool to design, develop, and test APIs. It is available as a desktop client application for Mac, Windows, and Linux. Postman has a free version and paid versions. More details about this and the comparison of the different versions is available at this URL. You can register for Postman at the URL given here, and you can also download the Postman from the URL specified here. Now, I have already installed Postman on my laptop, so we'll not go through these steps in the interest of time. So let's go back to the Postman app. Once you install Postman, this is the UI that you are going to see. The thing you will need to do here is create a collection. So I'm going to create a collection. The concept of collection is the concept of folder that you create on your disk where you keep all the related files together. So in Postman, we are going to use collection to keep all the API requests together. So let me go ahead and create a collection. I'm going to name it as Salesforce. Click on Create. And now that we have created a collection, the first step is to establish a connection with Salesforce. So let's see how to do that. Let me go back to the slide for a moment. Now, how do you connect to Salesforce? We need to send an authorization request, and this request needs to be sent in a specific format where we will need to specify the endpoint URL, the type of the OAuth flow, the client ID and client secret. This is what we will get from the connected app, and then username and password. Now, do note that there are different OAuth flows, but in this case, we will just be using the basic username password flow. And once we have replaced the values on the slide shown earlier, this is how it is going to look like. So we are going to be connecting to login.salesforce.com. We will provide the value of the client ID, the client secret, username, and password. Now, if you have a security token, then you need to append the security token with the password. So let's do that in our Postman application. So how do I create a request to connect to Salesforce? I am going to click on New. I will be creating a new request. I'm going to select Request. The request name is going to be Login to Salesforce. You can give it any name you want and will save it in the Salesforce collection that we created earlier. So I have now one request under this collection, which is Login to Salesforce. Now in this, I need to specify the values as I have shown on the slide. So the first thing we will need to do is to change the HTTP method to POST. POST is for sending data to the Salesforce endpoint. And we need to specify the URL So there is a specific URL that you need to send this request to. I'm going to copy and paste this URL. Now note that since I am connecting to my dev org, I am using login.salesforce.com. But if you want to connect to Sendbox, you will need to replace it with test.salesforce.com. Now I need to send certain parameters to this request. So I am going to specify the parameters under the params tab in Postman. So I am going to specify the different parameters. Grant type will be password as we are using the OAuth username password flow. Then I'm going to specify client ID, client secret, username, and password. And I'm going to copy and paste these values from my text document so that I don't make any error. So let me do that. So this is the value of my client ID. Again, I got this value when I created the connected app. For client secret, again, I'm going to copy and paste it. My username. And then finally my password. Now note that I have already appended the security token to this password. So you will need to do the same. Click on save. This will save this API request. And now we are ready to make a connection to Salesforce. To do that, click on send. Now we sent this API request to Salesforce and Salesforce has returned the response. So note the response, but first thing you will need to note is what was the status of this API call. So if you look at the status here, 200 okay, this denotes that this API call was successful. And in the response body, Salesforce has sent me these values. Now there are two very important things to note in these values. One is the access token and another one is the instance URL. Now the instance URL determines the endpoint where all the subsequent requests will need to be sent. And if you have configured my domain, then this is going to be the my domain URL. And the second thing we need to note is the access token. Access token is basically the sort of authorization when you are sending a request to Salesforce. Salesforce will determine whether you can access the resources requested based on the value of this access token. So again, you will need to copy and paste these two values in your text file as we are going to need it in the subsequent calls. So let me save it one more time. And now that we have established the connection, the first thing we are going to do is to see how to query records using the REST API. So let me go back to slides. Now, how do you query records from Salesforce? So for querying records, what we need is an URI. URI stands for Uniform Resource Identifier, or you can also call it an endpoint URL where the API request will be sent. Sorry. This URI consists of the base URL, which is the value of instance URL that we got back from the login call. And then it is going to have the API type, the API version, and your query parameters since we want to query data from Salesforce. And then for every call to Salesforce, it requires an access token and a content type. Content type will determine in what format are you going to receive the response. So we'll take a look at that. Now let's switch back to Postman. We are going to create another request here. So click on new, select request. And the request, we are going to name it as query data from Salesforce. Save it to the same collection. Now, since we are going to be sending a query, we will need to set the HTTP method as get, and we need to specify the URL that I shown on the slide. So let me copy and paste that URL. Now notice that once I have pasted it, it also populates the query parameters. So my parameter currently is just simply select name from account, and that's all I am doing to keep it simple. Now, for me to send this query to Salesforce, I also need to give me access token. So how do I specify my access token? I will go to headers and I am going to add a key here called authorization. Now the authorization is going to be in the format of bearer. So you have to add this keyword bearer here. And you also need to copy and paste the access token from the login call. So let me go here, copy the access token and paste it here. Once I have done that, I also need to specify the content type. So as you are typing these keys here, Postman will automatically populate it as these are predefined values that you need to choose from. And what I am telling Salesforce is that I want to get the response in JSON format. So I have selected JSON. Now let me save it. And I'm ready to send this request to Salesforce. So let's do that and keep the fingers crossed. Now, once I have sent this request, the first thing you always need to note is whether your request was successful or not. So status 200, okay, denotes that yes, this request was successful. And if you look at the response that Salesforce has returned, this is in the JSON format because that is the content type that we specified here. Now, what it tells me here is that it has returned a total of 12 records. And since I just requested for name, you are going to see that it sends me the name back. So I have edge communications, I have pyramid constructions, and so on. If I go back to my on the UI, and if I go to the accounts tab, you are going to see these 12 records. And this is what I have received in my API call. Now, since this is a simple SOQL query, I can modify this query. So for example, let's say that I want to add billing state, and then I want to limit the records to 1 only. So I will add limit 1. This is the normal SOQL query that you will specify here. Click on save, click on send. And now the number of records returned is just 1, and it is edge communications. I do not see any more records here. Now let's go back to the slides and see what we have done so far. So first what we did was we connected to Salesforce and got an access token. Then we made a REST call specifying the resource URI, which stands for Uniform Resource Identifier. We specified the HTTP method as GET, and we set the request headers for access token and content type. Now, in response to this API call, what Salesforce returned me was the status code. 200 denotes that everything was okay, the request was executed successfully, and then the response body, which was returned to us in the JSON format. Now, since we are using Postman, we can see all this data in the Postman UI. But if you are making this API call from any external application, like let's say Java, what you can do is use Java library and methods to process the JSON response returned by the API. So whether you are using Java or Python or any other programming language, usually these languages have the libraries and methods to parse your JSON data, and you can make use of that based on your requirement. We have seen how do we query records from Salesforce using API. Next, let's take a look at how do we create records in Salesforce using the REST API. So for creating the records, again, there is a specific URI. The change that you are going to see in this URI is I am also specifying what is my request type and what is the request identifier. So here I'm going to create a record in the account object. And the HTTP method that I need to use for this is post. I will need to send the headers, the authorization access token, and the content type. Content type here will specify in what format am I going to send my request, or what is going to be the request body. So the body is going to be the field API name and the field value. When we are sending a request body, we also call it a payload. So what is the payload that I'm going to send? Now let's switch back to the Postman app. So I am going to create another request to create a record. Now to do that, I can just go to my previous call, click on these three dots here and click on duplicate. And the first thing I will do is to change the name of this request. So I'm going to say create record in Salesforce, just so that it becomes clear. Now I need to specify my HTTP method as post. So I'm going to do that. And then I need to specify the URI. So I am going to copy and paste it. Now, as you can see here, I want to create a record in the account object, and that is what this URI specifies. Then I'm going to go to headers. My authorization and content type is already set here because this I created this request by copying an existing request where I have already set the authorization and content type. So let me save it. And the last thing I need to do is to send the payload. So I'm going to copy and paste the payload. Now, how do I send the payload in Postman? So I'm going to click on this body, set the format as raw, and I'm going to specify it in the JSON format. I am just creating a record with just one field value called name. So this is going to be the account name, and the name will be AS Agarwal Incorporation. So let me save it one more time. And I will send this request to Salesforce. Now, the first thing you will notice again is the status. So this time I'm getting a status of 201, which is saying that my request was executed and a record was created. And in the response, Salesforce also sends me the ID of the record that was created, whether this call was successful or not. If it was not successful, then what were the errors encountered? So now since my call was successful, let's go to the UI and see if there is already a record there. So I'm going to go to Salesforce UI. I'm going to refresh this page. And you will see that the record AS Agarwal Incorporation has been created, but this was created by making an API call. Now, I did not specify the values for the billing state and phone. I will do that next, and for that, I'm going to make an update call to Salesforce. So let's go back to the presentation. How do I make an update call to the Salesforce using REST API? So again, the base URL is going to remain the same. I am going to use the same account object, but this time I have added one more parameter here, which is the Salesforce record ID. Now this is going to specify which record needs to be updated. Secondly, rather than using the post method, I am going to use the patch method. So the patch HTTP method denotes that an existing content needs to be updated. I am going to send the same header, access token and content type. And also I am going to send the values of the fields that needs to be updated. So let's try this out. I'll go to Postman again. I am going to copy this again for my update call. I will change this to update record in Salesforce. Now I need to first change the HTTP method to patch, and I need to specify the account ID of the account that I need to update. So I got the ID from my previous call. I am going to copy and paste this record ID and append it to the URI here. And then headers will remain the same, so I don't need to make any changes, but I need to set the value of billing state and the phone number. So let me copy and paste the payload from my text file. Now my billing state will change to Singapore, phone will change to a phone number. Let me save this request. Click on send. Now again, take a look at the status. So status says 204, which again denotes a successful execution. But also note that for update call, Salesforce is not going to return you any values in the response, which is pretty normal. Now let's verify whether this record was actually updated or not. So I will go back to the browser. I'm going to refresh this page again, and you will see that the billing state and the phone number has been updated. So this is how basically you create and update records. Now let's see how do we delete a record using the REST API. So for deleting, the URI remains exactly the same as what we used for the update call, but the HTTP method that we are going to use is now will change to delete. We need to send the headers again, the access token, and the request body in this case will be nothing or null. So let's try this out. I'll go to Postman. I'm going to copy and duplicate this. Before anything, I will modify the name to delete record in Salesforce. And I will need to change the method to delete. Now this URI remains the same. I have specified which account record needs to be deleted. Let's save this. Click on send. And again, what we are seeing here is the status 204. Even for delete, Salesforce is not going to return you any response, which again is normal. So let's go to UI and see if the record has actually been deleted or not. I'll come here, refresh this page, and you are no longer going to see that record AS Agarwal Incorporation. To double confirm it, I am going to go to recycle bin. And now you can see that this record is in the recycle bin because it was deleted from the object. So this is how you basically delete a record in Salesforce. Now this was a basic demo of how you execute REST APIs for querying the records, creating, updating, and deleting. There are some useful features that Postman provides. So let's take a look at these features now. So if I switch back to Postman, now what you will see here is whatever request that you are executing, Postman is saving all of that in a history. So at any point of time, if you want to go back to your earlier request, you can see it in the history and it is sorted by the date. If you want to add a particular request to a collection, you can again click on the three dots here and save request. So this is a useful feature. We have already seen the purpose of collection, which is nothing but a folder. Where you can use collection is like, let's say if you are dealing with multiple systems. So for example, I created a collection here called Salesforce, and then I am grouping all the calls to Salesforce together. Similarly, you can create a collection for your ERP system or warehouse management system and group all the requests together. But what is more interesting is there is a feature called environment in Salesforce. Now, what is an environment? So if you look at this here, you can define different environments in Salesforce. Now, if I go back to my first call, which was logging to Salesforce, you note that I have specified or hard-coded the values in this login call. But when we are working on a project, we are not working on one single environment. So for example, you will need to work with multiple environments like dev, SIT, UAT. And if you have to create a request for all the environments separately, that is not very productive. Postman gives you the feature whereby you can change or dynamically select the environment without having to change the values here. How do we do that? So let's go ahead and create an environment. For that, you click on this icon here called Manage Environment, click on Add, and let me call this environment as Salesforce Demo. Now I can define all the variables here. So let me go ahead and do that. I will define grant type as password. I am going to specify client ID. client secret, username, password. And then again, I will need to copy and paste the values from my text document. So let me do that. So my client ID, I'm going to get the client secret, going to get the username, going to get the password, and I will click on add. Now my environment is set, but I also need to make one change in my call. And the change in the call is going to be, rather than specifying these hard-coded values here, I need to now point it to the variable, the environment variable that I have just created. So I'm going to go here. So let me first select the environment that I created, which was Salesforce demo. And I will change the value. How do I specify the variable here? I need to type the double curly brace. And as I start typing the value of the variable, it will automatically show me here. So I am going to change the value for all the keys here. So this is client ID, client secret, username, and password. And let me save this first. Now that we have changed this to use an environment, let's see if this is successful or not. So I'm going to make a send call again to Salesforce. And now it has returned me the value, but the parameters, the values that it passed to this call is what it got from the environment. Just so that we note the difference, know that my current instance that I am connecting to is AS Agarwal COM2. Now I have also pre-created another environment here called Salesforce Dev. So let me select that and let me send a call to a different Salesforce org. So if I click on send, you will see that the instance URL has now changed to my dev org. So earlier I was making a call to AS Agarwal COM2. Now this is just AS Agarwal-dev. Now this is how you can work with the environment. But there is one more issue that we need to address. So if you take a look at this get call, query data from Salesforce, what we did here was we hard-coded the name of the URL. And then we also hard-coded the access token under the authorization. Now, this is not going to work with the multiple environments because every environment will have its own instance URL and its own access token. So that is challenge number one. How do I change it for different environments? Now, the challenge number two is that I cannot set this to any value. The value that needs to be set here is the value that I am going to get from my login call to Salesforce. So how do I dynamically pick these values and populate the environment with these values? Let's take a look at that. So let me go back to my demo environment. I am going to add two more variables to this demo environment. So I am going to specify access token. I will not specify any value here because this needs to be populated dynamically. And then I'm also going to specify another environment variable here called instance URL. Again, not going to specify any value here. Click on update, close this. Now, if I want to see what is the value of my environment, I can click on this eye icon here, and it is going to show me all the values. Now, note that I have the values for all other variables, but I do not have the value for this. Now, the next challenge to address is how do I populate this? So what Postman allows you to do is it allows you to run a script once you have made a call and once you have gotten a response. So in this login call to Salesforce, I will need to populate the value of those two variables. How do I do that? I will go to the test tab and I am going to write a small script here. So let me copy and paste this script. It is a very simple script. What I am asking Postman to do is get the JSON data and then set the environment variable access token to the value received. So this JSON data.access token is pointing to this value. JSON data.instance URL is pointing to this value. Now, as you can see in the small text here, it says test scripts are written in JavaScript and are run after the response is received, meaning that once Salesforce returns a response, the script will be executed. And in this script, we are setting the value of those two variables. So let me save it. Let's do a quick check again. So these two values are null. There is no value set. I'm going to send this request to Salesforce. My call is successful. And now if I go and take a look at the environment again, you will see that the access token and instance URL is populated. So now I have got the values that I need. Second thing I will need to do is to go and modify this to use these values. How do I do that? So first thing I will need to do is to change this URL because I can't hard code it anymore. So I'm going to use the same syntax, double curly braces, and I am going to point it to the instance URL. So that is number one. Let's save it. And then also for the authorization, I don't want to hard code the values here. So I'm going to change it to use the environment variable again. And this is going to point to access token. Click on save. Now, if I send this query to Salesforce, now notice that my environment is still set to demo. So now the response that I am getting is from the demo. But if I want to change it to dev, so first I will do is I am going to change the environment to dev.org. We'll send this request. Now the instance URL received is for AS Agarwal dev. And now I can go here and execute this query. And it is going to return me the response from the dev.org. As you can see here, the name has changed from Edge Communications to Partners. This is how you can make your Postman environment more dynamic. You do not need to hard code the values and keep changing it if you are working with multiple environments. Now, one final part that I want to show here is if you want to execute all these calls together, Postman also allows you to do that. For that, you just hover your cursor on the collection, click on this arrow key here, click on run. It is going to open collection runner. So first of all, you need to select the environment. I'm going to select demo environment. I will check the box to save responses so that I can review the output. Now, since I have just made changes to the first two calls, I'm going to uncheck this. And then I'm going to click on Run Salesforce. It is going to execute all those API requests one by one. The main thing you need to note or pay attention to is that your requests were successful. So you can see 200 OK, 200 OK. Now, if you want to see the response that was returned, so you can hover or click on this request name and click on the response body. It will show you what was the values received from the Salesforce. Similarly, you can do that for your query data. And you can see here it is returning Edge Communications because we executed it for the demo environment. So quite a useful features in Postman when you are working on the APIs. Now, as a developer, if you are thinking that all this looks good, but how do I translate it to a code? So how do I translate it for Java or Python or any other language? Now, Postman gives you one feature to make it easier. So you select a particular API call, you can click on this code here, And Postman is going to give you options to convert this code in a few languages. Now, I'm not a developer, so I do not know how well this works, but this is something that you can explore on your own. So once you have tested it from the Postman, and if you want to now run it from any of these applications, you can get the code and incorporate it in your code. So a good feature here. Now, at one point in time, you may be working on multiple projects or even for multiple clients. So Postman gives you another feature where you can stash everything away and then create a new workspace. So that introduces the concept of workspace. Now note that currently I'm working on workspace called My Workspace. If I am working for a new client, then I can click here. I can create a new workspace. So let's say that I need to do this presentation for Singapore Developers Group also, and I want to keep that completely separate. So I will write the name as Singapore Developer Group, click on Create Workspace. And now you start from the blank slate. So all the collections, all the environments that you specified earlier, all that has gone away. And now you can work on a completely new environment. If you need to switch back to your old environment or any other workspace, then just click here, click on My Workspace, and everything comes back as it is. Now, I wanted to show you a couple of other useful features also, but I think we are running out of time. So I want to just focus on these last 2 points for the other REST API calls. So let me quickly walk you through that. Now, an obvious question that you may have is, okay, so I have given you a 3-4 URIs, but how do I get a list of all the different URIs that Salesforce provides? So for that, you can refer to the Salesforce Developers Guide. I already have this guide open here. Now, if you go to this guide, so there are a few examples here. For example, one example is getting information about my organization. And if you want to get the information about your org limits, now this is the URI that you can copy and paste in Postman, run it, and it is going to tell you what is the allocation in your Salesforce org. So what is the maximum allocation and how much is remaining. So if you have made a few API calls, then you will see that the remaining number will reduce for the API calls. So, and then if you want to take a look at all the different URIs available in the REST API, you can go to the same developers guide, click on reference, and you are going to see a complete list of all the different URIs that Salesforce provides for REST API call. And finally, so now that you know how to make calls, you know that how do you get the URIs for different calls, you may have another question. So does that mean that I will need to create all those requests manually in Salesforce? The answer to your question is no. I can point you to a library where you can import a list of 200 plus requests from the Postman. So what is that URL? Again, you can go to this blog post. I have given you the link at the end of this presentation. What you will need to do here is scroll down and go to Salesforce APIs for Postman. Now this is going to take you to the GitHub repository where there is a library of all the different Postman requests. You can download this by clicking on the link here, latest Postman collection. It is going to give you a JSON file. I have already downloaded it. Now, once you have downloaded it, then all you will need to do is click on import and then import it from your desktop. So I have this file here. I'm going to click on open, click on import. It is going to take a couple of seconds. And you will see that it has created a new collection with Salesforce APIs, and there are 233 requests that this JSON file provides you, and these are further grouped logically under different subfolders. So you can experiment with these APIs for your own learning purpose. Now, when you are importing this, this also gives you a template environment. So you can use this template environment, you can duplicate this environment and change the values as per your environment. So if I go here, these are the different values or variables that this environment has. Just clone it. You may not want to change directly in the template environment. Clone it and then set the values as per your Salesforce org. Well, that basically brings us to the end of this session. Now, here are some useful URLs that you can refer to advance your knowledge. So I have given you the link to the REST API developer guide, the URL to the blog post with the Postman collection that I just imported. If you are new to APIs, you can also refer to the Trailhead modules and then 2 videos. Now let's open the floor for Q&A.
Hi, Ashish. There were a lot of questions that came across, and I've just noted them down for your easy reference and for saving your time. I'm just gonna share those with you. Probably you can just give the answers directly to the team if you're okay with that.
Sure.
Yeah, the first question was from Krishna, and he was asking about sending the parameters in the query, which was not a secure method. So this goes back to the first option that you showed, where you are actually adding all the client ID and client secret, username, and passwords in the respective URL as parameters. So
yeah, so if you notice, I have used the HTTPS, and when we are sending a request through the HTTPS, the entire value will be encrypted. So it is not going to go over the network in plain text. Now for API call, Salesforce supports only HTTPS. So you can't make an API call with the HTTP.
So I hope that answers your question, Krishna. So the next one was, how do you actually create bulk records or add more than one records using this particular API? Is there a process to do that? And what?
Fantastic question. So the answer to that question is Salesforce has something called Composite API. Are you guys still seeing my screen?
No, we are not.
Okay, so let me share that. So let me just search. So the answer to that question is that there is Salesforce gives you Composite API. Now in Composite API, you can create multiple records. As you can look at this example here, first of all, it is creating an account, and then for that account, it is also creating a contact. So you do not need to specify the account ID. This API is going to do that automatically by using a particular syntax. So the account that was created, the contact will be created for that account. I do not know what is the exact number of records that you can create, but I think the limit is fairly high. You can create a few hundred records using the Composite API.
Got it. Great. There are also a couple of questions on the different methods of authorization, and if there's a possibility that you can actually showcase the login call request for an imported collection to show how passwords actually went safely.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, let me understand that again. So what?
There are two questions here. The first question was, what are the different authorization methods or flows that is available apart from using the Salesforce username and password? And if you could show that, that was from Dheeraj. And the other question from Krishna recently was, is there a possibility that you can actually show the login call request from a Git repo so that you can show how the passwords went safely as well? So probably you can actually answer them both together if I'm not wrong.
Okay, so first of all, there are different methods for connecting to Salesforce. What I have used is a simple OAuth username password flow. But what you can also do is you can use these methods here. So under authorization, if you select OAuth 2.0, then what it will do is it is going to connect, it will take you to the Salesforce login page where you will need to specify your username password. After that, it will ask you to allow Postman to access it, and it is going to return the access token. So you do not need to hard code your request, your username and password the way I have done it. So you do not need to specify that in the parameters.
Right. So is there a possibility, do you have time to showcase the login call request right now?
I will need to test that. Maybe what I can do, I think probably in the interest of time, but for everyone's benefit,
Sure.
I don't want to experiment with this right now, but I can definitely do that. And then maybe I think I can send, a screenshot to Saktivel and he can share it with the group.
Yeah, that is better. I think actually we are running out of the time.
Yeah.
Sadish, do we have any other questions from the chat window?
Just one last question. This is related to the environment, actually, multiple environments. So this is again from Krishna. So he was looking forward to understand if, in order to make the same request across multiple environments, which should we name the variables same for grant type, client data, etc. on each environment? Where do we set up, or is it only, it's like, is it specific to a specific environment, or can we make it as a global one? Also, what is the scope of these environments, and what is the specific? Again, is it specific for a collection, or is once you actually define that particular variable, can every collection access it?
Right. Okay. So first of all, it will make sense to define the same variable in all the environments. And the reason for that is, so let's say that I have used this environment demo and I have used these variable names. Now you will need to use these variable names in your requests. So if I go to login.salesforce, if I go to the parameters here, I have used that variable. Now, if you are using different variables for different environments, you will need to come back and change those variable names here. So the answer to your question is, it is recommended so that you can make these API call against different environments. Now, what is the scope of this environment? So the scope is within a workspace. You can use these variables in different collections. It is not specific to a particular collection. But yes, if you are creating multiple workspaces, then you will need to create an environment separately there. And I think the third question was on whether we can have global variables. So yes, you can also create global variables. Now for creating the global variable, again, you go to manage environment, click on globals, and here you can specify the global variable. So it will not be environment specific. It will be for all the environments.
Excellent. I think that summarizes most of the questions here, apart from the one which you said you'll come back to us later, which is good.
Yeah. So for the OAuth, how do we initiate the OAuth call without having to give the username password? I'm going to share the screenshots with Saktivel, and he can share it with the group.
Excellent. Thank you, Ashish. I think it was really, really helpful for most of the people, and I think it's very important for us to understand without having to, create an integration. How do we test the APIs is more important for everybody to understand that there is a possibility using Postman.
Exactly, and I think the beauty of using a tool like Postman is that it makes it very simple. So even like administrators or consultants who are not typically developers can use it to understand the nuances of API call, and it will really help them in understanding how exactly integration works.
Yeah, it's really true. Yeah, even basically whenever we implemented any of the REST API, and we usually testing using the workbench. Even nowadays, the workbench also they clearly mention whenever we are going with that workbench in the REST Explorer, they ask you to try in the Salesforce API for the Postman. So it's a great insight about the Postman. Actually, it's not only you specified about to getting and create or update or delete the Salesforce data using that through the Postman. Also, you highlighted the tools provided the features like the creating the environment and passing the dynamic variable and maintaining the workspace and getting the history. So this is a really a great session, Sis. And also you shared the challenges and how to overcome passing the dynamic value, right? So instead of creating and passing that value from the each environment, so you showed that running the small script in the test tab in the Postman. That is really an awesome session. Okay, so if there is no other questions, we'll go with that the Swag distribution. I'm sharing my screen. Can you please stop your presentation?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm sharing my screen. So the participant list, I collected the participant list. If anyone name is missing, please let me know. Maybe add the chat window. I will add it. Guys, I will give you the 1 minute's time just to check your name will be there or not in the notepad.
And Saktivel, I am seeing a lot of questions in the chat. So what I will do after this session is I'm going to respond to, I will write my response to each of these questions and share it with you. And if you can share it with the group, that will really be helpful.
Yeah, sure. Once you pass it that answer, I will send that email in all the group members.
Right. Thanks, Saktivel.
Yeah, perfect. So Vibin Nirmal is missing, right? Okay, I will add it. So any person name is missing, please quickly check it. We are running out of the time, I think. And even it's a weekend, the Friday. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, Isita is already there. Okay. Okay, if everyone name is there, then we'll do that. The race, actually, it's a virtual way we do that race. Okay, I just copy paste those participants and then name list. So I'm editing that list. So let me refresh. Okay, I set that instead of 30 seconds, I will set, okay, 15 seconds. Okay, set. All the very best, guys. Keep going. Shalini Gupta. Wow. Yeah, Shalini Gupta is the SWAT winner. Just ping me your email ID. Then I will distribute that swag. Let's do one more. Again, 15 seconds. I start. All the very best, guys. Let's see this time who's get. Come on. Now this time, Rahul Sharma. Keep send me your email. I will contact after that. Thank you everyone for joining this session. Thanks Ashish for your wonderful presentation about the Postman to use the Salesforce API. We'll see you in the wonderful sessions. Thank you all.
Thank you everyone. I appreciate you participating in this session.